These are the first group of white South Africans who've been fast-tracked into refugee status. The Trump administration made a big thing about cracking down on immigration and suspending the refugee resettlement program. So questions are being asked, and why has such an exception been made for this group of people?
White farmers are being brutally killed and their land is being confiscated in South Africa.
Billionaire Elon Musk grew up in apartheid South Africa. He's one of Donald Trump's closest advisors, and he claims that there is a genocide of white people happening. South Africa's foreign minister says that there has been no land confiscation, and Donald Trump's claims that murders are happening in large numbers is not backed by any police data.
And that's what the United States says they're undergoing in South Africa. That's why they've opened the door for them.
Yes, and they don't fit that bill. They don't fit that description. And I had a conversation with President Trump on the phone, and he said, what's happening down there? And I said, President, what you've been told by those people who are opposed to transformation back home in South Africa is not true. And I added to him, I said, we were well taught by Nelson Mandela and other iconic leaders like Oliver Tambo on how to continue to build a united nation out of the diverse groupings that we have in South Africa. We're the only country on the continent where the colonizers came to stay, and we have never driven them out of our country. So they are staying, and they're making great progress. It's a fringe grouping that does not have a lot of support, that is anti-transformation and anti-change, that would actually prefer to see South Africa going back to apartheid type of policies. And I said to him, I would never do that. I learned at the feet of Nelson Mandela, and we intend to proceed with the implementation of our constitutional architecture. So those people who have fled are not being persecuted, they are not being hounded, they are not being treated badly, and they are leaving ostensibly because they don't want to embrace the changes that are taking place in our country in accordance with our constitution. So we think that the American government has got the wrong end of the stick here.
Everyone should know this, but apartheid was basically a system of laws in South Africa, a system of laws that were designed to oppress people of color and all people of color. Apartheid made it illegal for black and white people to interact with one another, my parents included. At the time when they were a couple, it was against the law. Me being born was against the law.
It's a crime for him to be here.
Yeah, my dad couldn't be on my birth certificate. My parents couldn't have me on you had to have a registry of all the people that lived in your house at the time. My grandmother couldn't have that in her house. But I think most importantly, the thing a lot of people don't realize is apartheid essentially was perfect racism. I'm still learning about how perfect the system was in terms they went around the world. The government actually set up a commission to go around the world and study racism. And America was one of the places they came. They went to Australia, they went to the Netherlands, they came to America, and they were like, what is the racism here? How does the state oppress people of color? What can we use from the system to take home? And they did that. They went to South Africa and they made the most perfect racism ever. And that is the world I lived through. I'm lucky because, I was 6 years old when it was officially ended. But as anyone knows, when officially a thing ends, doesn't mean it goes away.
Why? Because Orania is a whites-only town. Black people cannot live or work here. Every job is reserved for the whites. Every task performed by white people. And yet the residents of this town insist they're not racist. Here's a report.
Welcome to Orania, a remote farming town in South Africa's Northern Cape. It prints its own money, runs its own banks, has its own holidays, and manages its own affairs. Sounds like the perfect township to relocate, right? Well, hold your horses. To enter Orania, you have to qualify on certain parameters. The foremost is the color of your skin. It has to be white, because Orania is a whites-only town. the uniqueness is too obvious to ignore. Wherever you go in this township, you will only find Afrikaners. White people with Dutch ancestry. They do all the work, from playing the piano at the church, to reading out the Bible to believers, to running the kitchen at a restaurant, to even gardening at orchards. All jobs, big or small, are reserved for white people. But the residents of this town insist that they're not racist.
We are from Africa, that's why we call ourselves Afrikaners. We want to remain here. We also want to retain our identity. Now, to retain one's identity is not a racist impulse. We wanted to retain our identity against the English or the British imperialism also, and they're even whiter than we are, much whiter.
Orania is often dubbed as the last outpost of apartheid, a system of institutionalized racial segregation. South Africa abolished apartheid in the 1990s.
Why can't a black person come here? It's not the right question. It's more a question like a marriage between two people. It's an exclusive affair. Doesn't mean you're against anyone else.
They are preserving your culture on a land that belongs to South Africa.
The land here we bought, we paid for it.
From who?
Well, at that stage we bought it from the previous owner, which was the government.
I don't think an African can leave Africa, go to Europe, and say that we just bought this land and no one is allowed to come in.
We feel part of this continent, and maybe people don't agree, but I don't have another home. Obviously, I know that I have European roots.
Yeah.
For 400 years, my people have been here.
Yeah.
I love Africa. I don't want to live anyplace else. When I've been overseas, this is the only place that I feel at home. These men are part of our history. No nation's history is only good, but also no nation's history is only bad.
Would you agree with me if I say that this man performed a lot of atrocities in the past?
Obviously, these are controversial figures, and I think that's why Orania is also a solution to a lot of the international conversation about monuments, because this is on private land, private funds, and it's our history.
I know it's your history, but at the end of the day, a lot of people were harmed in the process. You don't think if you are embracing this, you're definitely embracing apartheid?
Is it okay to celebrate Shaka Zulu, the Zulu leader? Do you know who that is?
I know who Shaka Zulu is.
He killed a lot of people. Is it fine to celebrate him?
That's a question for South Africans.
That is a question. This is a question for Orania.
He was more like the architect for apartheid. I mean, we can never forget our history. But I mean, I feel like this bin here, it's more like a sword in the eyes of the people of South Africa.
I don't think so.
You don't
think so.
Do you believe that whatever you guys are practicing here is racism?
I do not believe that we are practicing racism. To tell you the truth, if the question is, are there racists in Orania, I can assure you there are. There are racists in every town in South Africa, and every country in the world will find racists. That is a fact. The Orania model is a model of cultural preservation, and that is not racist.
So if you check the coat of arms of South Africa, it said there is unity in diversity. What you are practicing in here is not unity in diversity.
I beg to differ. How can there be any diversity in South Africa if cultures are not allowed to be themselves? Then what you're not going to get in Orania is people falling on their knees, continuously saying sorry for their history.
The white South African, the Afrikaners, they call themselves.
Afrikaners.
They're claiming they're being discriminated against, and Trump is allowing white South African immigrants to come to America. This is a man who ran on America, and a lot of his base and stuff don't like immigrants. What they meant to say is they don't like immigrants that don't look like them. Trump, who went on a speech and said, "Now we got to deport the homegrowns," talking about deporting citizens. But now they want to bring in white immigrants. And what's going on in South Africa right now is they're trying to pick up the pieces from the remnants of apartheid.
To the 50 Afrikaners who fled to the US, calling themselves refugees, you are not refugees. You are just a case study of white flight dressed up as martyrdom. You're not escaping violence, you're escaping equality. South Africa didn't chase you away. You ran. Yes, South Africa is one of the most violent countries in the world. Yes, brutality exists. But let's be honest, violence affects all communities, not just white farmers. Black, colored, Indian, and yes, white people are all targets of a national crime crisis. What we have is a breakdown in safety, not a white genocide. This is not ethnic cleansing, it's criminal collapse, and running to the US won't fix it. You are part of a 7% minority, but somehow still manages to control over 70% of the wealth. That is not persecution, that's privilege on a guilt trip. And let's be real, if we tried to relocate just half of the Afrikaans population, it would take decades, billions in logistics, and you'd still end up culturally homeless in a country that don't want your apartheid baggage. You're not brave, you're not victims. You're scared of a world where you don't get to be in charge, and that makes the rest of the Afrikaans community cringe, because you make us look weak. South Africa is broken, and it's our problem to solve. So if you don't have the spine to do so, stay gone.